Hello and welcome back to my channel High School History. Today we are here with a different kind of video which kicks off a series which is being built to help regular classroom teachers to help special needs children or children with specific learning disabilities in their regular classrooms. We definitely know that there is a dearth of special ed teachers, special educators, counselors in the country, and it's quite a challenge to find good ones. And the challenge is twofold. One, because there are not enough such individuals who specialize in teaching children with specific disabilities, but also there are a lot of schools which may not be able to hire sometimes a full-time or even a part-time special ed teacher or a counselor. So what happens is teachers like you and me, I'm a regular teacher in a regular classroom. I might often encounter students with very specific learning disabilities, special learning needs, which I may not be able to identify to begin with. And even if I do identify, I really don't know what strategies to use and how to help set up such students for success in a regular classroom, right? So what we are going to do is kick off this series with Apranta, who I'm going to bring up now. Yes. Yeah. So let's welcome back Apranta on our channel. And if you've been a regular here, you definitely have seen her videos around. She has done a couple of sessions for students, how to manage stress and how to, what are the best ways of study. And we've also done, I think, one mental health session for teachers as well, haven't we, Apranta?
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
That was fun.
So today, Apranta comes in her capacity as a counselor, someone who has worked with children with special needs, children with specific learning disorders, and she is going to help us kick off this entire series where we are trying to, provide support to teachers, non-special ed teachers, to be able to set up their students for future success in a regular environment where the teacher may not have a lot of time. On an average, a teacher might have 45 minutes in a
Yeah.
class, and numbers could range anywhere from 30 to 50 students. So, in such a situation, how does a teacher, one, even begin to identify that there might be something there, there might be a learning issue, and once it is identified, then what are the strategies, then what are the certain tips that the teacher can share with our special needs students to help themselves as well, because at the end of the day we also have to look at making our students independent learners as well. So I think that's the biggest challenge, Apranta. We just don't have enough special ed teachers, as many as we would like, um, to provide the best support that we can to our students.
And our school systems are taking in so many uh, diverse learners that even if we do have the required number of people, it's going to be a task to meet the needs of everybody without taking the help of regular teachers in the classroom. So one special educator can't solve a problem. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And at least the school where Apranta and I work in, the policy always has been that wherever possible, the student should be with everyone else, because that's how
yeah.
the world functions. Once they are out of the school system, there'll be no special jobs for them or special rooms for them to carry on with their lives. But they will have to learn how to work with everyone else, and not everyone would, one, know about your special needs, and secondly, even if they know, either they wouldn't know how to support you or they wouldn't want to support you. I mean, you have all kinds of people in the world. So how does one also function? Because school is not just about learning and giving exams, but it's also training for life. So I think that's where it becomes essential for us to know how to set these kids up for success in future.
Essential.
Yeah. So Apranta, shall we bring up your screen and we launch straight into your guidance for the rest of us? All right. All right,
Right.
so here we are up with the presentation, and the stage is yours, Apranta.
Right, thank you. So I'm looking at strategies that help teachers to provide a context to the child and sort of like a beginning, like a leg up once we begin teaching and learning in the classroom. So as you know, learning disabilities are because of some sort of uh, genetic or nervous system issue which affect brain functioning in such a way that uh, the thinking processes, the attention memory processes associated with learning are affected, and so that shows up in different areas in the school and in the classroom, which is it may affect learning, I mean, in the form of reading, so understanding how letters and sounds are connected to each other, decoding what a letter would sound like to make it into a word, the fluency, like even if you're able to do it, it takes you a lot more effort, and uh, it's just slower recognizing words, understanding words, and understanding how they go together. That may be affected in terms of reading. Oral language, listening to, speaking, and interacting is also very much affected in certain kids with learning disabilities. And this means like they may not hear the entire sound, so king, king may sound like kin, kin to them, or it may even sound like kid, kid to them, and therefore that may affect their understanding. So if you say that the blanket is on the baby and the baby is on the blanket, these are two statements with the same words, but they have different meanings, right? So a child with specific language deficits may have difficulty seeing the difference or understanding the difference between the two because of the cognitive processes or thinking based processes that are affected. uh,
Yeah, Apranta,
some
I'd like to stop you here for a bit. Sorry for the interruption.
No
But when you
worries, no
just
worries.
said that, the baby is on the blanket or the blanket is on the baby. So for someone like me, I quickly picked that up, that it's actually kind of the opposite, even though it's using the same words. And because we've
Yeah,
sequenced the words differently, one sentence is kind of the opposite of the other.
right.
So tell me, does this happen with only a specific language, or um, or will the child, if the child comes from a bilingual home, which
Mhm.
many of us are, or at least our mother tongue might be something, and I might be learning in some other language. So does it translate into other languages also, or how does that work?
It does translate. The more unfamiliar a language, the
Okay.
more the errors is basically the thing. So wherever the child has had enough practice, wherever the child has had enough support to understand the differences, and has seen instances or maybe has even seen visual reminders of the statements, the child is at an advantage. But wherever it's unfamiliar territory,
Mhm.
the chances of errors increase.
So the child might
So
actually do understand the language better if this is the mother tongue, as
yeah,
opposed to a different language that the child might
yeah,
be learning
second
in.
language or
So
the
I
third
think that
language.
explains a lot of things which I am facing in my own classes, where and my I remember saying this to somebody, but I teach high school students, so the students are already, they've done at least 10 years of schooling before they come to me, and my question always was, but they've been learning in English medium right from nursery or first grade or second grade, wherever they joined the system, right up to now. So why is it that even now they're not able to, even read and comprehend maybe one of the most direct questions that I might have asked in the question paper? So I think this, when you said that one, unfamiliar language and may not have had enough practice and support,
Right.
possibly at home, maybe English is not the primary language spoken, um,
Even if
and
it
therefore the
is.
child does not get that support.
Huh.
So
And
children with this kind
academic
of a
language
disability
is
will
different.
struggle.
Huh. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that clarifies a lot to me. So I did use this tip with a lot of my students, who had problems expressing themselves or even understand comprehending the questions, especially for the board exams, because luckily for us, CBSE does print the question paper in two languages. At
Yeah.
least in Delhi, we see them in English and Hindi. So I often tell the students that अगर अंग्रेजी में नहीं समझ में आ रहा है, एक बार हिंदी में भी आप सवाल पढ़ लीजिए, तो थोड़ी सी और क्लैरिटी आ जाएगी. But unfortunately, I think in a lot of schools like ours, where we are primarily teaching in English, we are unable to create a bilingual question paper, because I would struggle to make a history question in
Same.
Hindi, because I did not
Yeah.
learn in that language. Though
Yeah.
I'm quite fluent in Hindi, but the
Orally.
technicalities of it when it talks about a subject. So, but definitely it's an eye opener to see that why a child who's been in the system, let's say for 10 years, who's learned in English, continues to struggle with comprehension. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. You also got to look at it like even within the language, in a familiar language like English, say for a child, if they've grown up in an English speaking home, academic language is still a higher difficulty level. It still has technical terms which a child may not encounter in day-to-day life. So directly teaching those terms is also important, and the child will not just get it. Like a lot of other children may get it just from immersion, by from being in an environment where these words are used. Children with learning disabilities, especially oral language deficits, they will need direct teaching of these terms, because it's almost like a foreign language. So that is there. uh,
Yeah, so that's definitely a very, very helpful tip, that if we can have a glossary or a vocabulary building exercise with the children, that definitely might help. I would also like to bring in here that NCRT does have a bunch of dictionaries for different subjects. I know they have one for sociology, for history. I'm sure they have for the science, for the STEM
yes,
subjects as well. So it would be, a good exercise, I think, to access these books. And I think these books are now available on the NCRT website as well. So the teachers can access these books and look at, helping children build their subject vocabulary, which might at least help them to, the primary comprehension of the question might become easier for them.
definitely. Personal vocabulary like diaries or something like that is a great strategy, because even the regular glossaries will have maybe definitions explaining the words in simpler language, but they may need something extra input, as an input from the child, for it to make sense to them. So not only the glossaries are a good first step, and a personal vocabulary journal will help for all subjects, so that the child knows and becomes familiar with these words. So yeah, that's, I love how you connected to existing resources. So that's pretty cool. uh, we also see deficits in written language, right? You not only spellings, which is what shows up usually, a teacher will be able to see the child is making similar spelling errors, reversing letters, doing things like that, and that may clue them in key, okay, this is a child with issues, or may need help with spelling. But more than that, there may be children who may know a lot but may not be able to translate it to the written form. And this discrepancy between, potential and ability and what they're able to achieve in the school setup, in assessment setups and things like that, is also a big indicator of learning disabilities. When you talk to the child knows a lot, is able to connect, is great at verbalizing themselves, but when they come down to write, it seems as if the child vanishes. I mean, their personality is gone, they're barely putting sentences together. So that fluency of writing, the ability to express themselves in a written format, is also a big indicator that this may be a child with learning disabilities. And then you have maths, which is scary for a lot of us, even if we don't have a learning disability. But what happens in dyscalculia, which is the kind of learning disability associated with maths, is that their ability to understand how numbers interact with each other, to add them, subtract them, do all of these calculations, and retain facts about math, and their operations and symbols, is affected. And so the fluency, the speed at which they can understand understand the information, process it, put it together, give output is affected, and obviously problem solving is affected. And some many times dyscalculia is accompanied with reading issues or written language issues or oral language issues. And so what is understood by the child in the classroom, what they're able to comprehend from a question, and then finally what they're able to write and express are all at different levels uh, affected. So, even if the child may actually find a way to like math, by the time the child goes through the ringer, it's a lot. So you have kids who are literally spending their entire day studying math but not being able to show any output, and all of their other subjects are affected. So you have a large range of diversity even within learning disabilities. One kid's learning disability is not the same thing with the other, and uh, severity across the spectrum is also different. And all of this affects how they acquire, so how they learn in the first place, and how that ability develops over time. So we're looking at a complex situation along with the social environment, expectations, perception of the self, the emotional, psychological aspects about self that the child has developed related to school and academics, which all affect the child's learning environment and the child's ability to process information. So we are complex creatures, and this is going to be a complex things which you'll have to look at different levels. But uh, at the base level, you can look at different characteristics that show up. So many children show up with short attention, memory issues. They don't listen well to directions. It seems like you're saying something, but the child is just not able to follow. Problems with when they're reading or writing, different, they mix up the letters, they mix up the numbers, mix up the sounds. Reading and writing ability is much poorer as compared to other children of their age. Eye hand coordination problems show up. So they may be clumsier than regular kids, or they may make their handwriting may be terrible. They may have problems sequencing things, like the jumbled words or jumbled sentences. It takes them hours, it seems. And generally they're disorganized, issues with taking in the instructions may also happen. Difficulty following instructions or directions also comes from inability to process auditory information, right? And so uh, on one day in one subject they may perform very differently, but in they generally seem more distractible, restless, impulsive, and it's as if they're not listening to you. They don't like things changing too much. They can't tell the time. They don't know the difference from right and left. They have problems reading out words, especially unfamiliar words. All of this may show up. Now, a caveat here: with after the COVID lockdown and after that gap of 2 years, many of our children, even without learning disabilities, may be showing these, so quote unquote, symptoms, right? So it may seem as if almost every child in the classroom may have a learning disability just because of the gap. But when we are diagnosing learning disabilities, those gaps are are exclusive. I mean, are criteria for exclusion, right? In the sense that if the problem is caused by the gap, then it would not be a learning disability. So you're looking at the average performance of your classroom when you're comparing these children. So you'll have a child who's even worse off, right? Who's not, who, despite, I mean, a lot of the children are facing difficulties, but you have children who are experiencing way more difficulties as compared to the average. Those would give you an indicator, okay, that could be a child with learning disabilities. Am I making sense?
Yes, it does get very clear because I think we've been having this debate that 2 years that the children have been at home, some of the basic skills, social skills in particular, that we expect the children to have learned by a certain age, those are missing. For instance, children are finding it increasingly difficult to sit in one place for an
Yeah.
extended period of time. Not that they should be in the first place, but often school requires you to stay put perhaps in the classroom for a while. A traditional exam situation where at least for 3 hours the student is sitting in one place. I mean, unable to even move around in the class, which would otherwise, be possible in a regular working day. Um, Often we'll see children forgetting. A lot of schools put a lot of emphasis, and I think rightly so, that when a teacher walks into the classroom, they all acknowledge the teacher and wish the teacher. Often we've seen that the students have forgotten, and we have to repeatedly remind them. So there are definitely social gaps are definitely there. Learning gaps are again. Uh, because online learning truly cannot replace the face-to-face learning experience that children may have. Maybe it works in the higher education sector, but in
That's
schools, I think, because schooling, I feel, is so much more than, as I said in the beginning, more than just reading some textbooks and doing some stuff and giving an exam. But it's really a part of growing up, as a social being. So I think these are gaps that we have been talking about. And yes, as you did rightly point out, that it's those kids. Uh, how to identify this point would be to see even those kids who are performing even lower than this level. So looking at the average in the class rather than looking at the top 5% and say, oh, the rest of them are all struggling. um, but to
they
look at
will.
the average, to look at the median, and then say, okay, there are these children who are performing even less than this. So perhaps look at what's going on there.
Yeah. And so generally now, that's once you're able to identify, you send them, you let their parents know, you send them to a special educator or a counselor, I mean a psychologist on the outside, who will do assessments on them and be able to judge and diagnose the child. So usually the special educator does an informal assessment because they are trained to understand what learning disabilities look like, and they may be able to use simple tests to understand whether it's indicative, whether the findings are indicative of learning disability. And then they go to a clinical psychologist who is the person licensed to assess and diagnose whether a child has a learning disability or not. So they will come in and do that. However, sometimes these conversations are hard. Many times parents are quite anxious, or parents are in denial that this is a problem. So it may be a conversation that will take time. It may be a conversation that may have to happen over the course of a period of time, in the sense that you may have to have multiple conversations over PTMs, over check-ins, for the parents to come to accept and be open to the idea that their child may need more help. And the CBSE is great at the help. Not, I mean, it's one of the systems in India which actually looks out for the kids. So we have extra time, we have writers for children who have specific difficulties with written expression and fluency. So they also, in certain cases, there are, so under the Persons with Disabilities Act, there are some 21 disabilities, and the CBSE has tried to find ways to help kids with all of these 21 disabilities, including learning disabilities. So there are multiple provisions like subject exemptions, scribes, even calculators. Sometimes in the case of dyscalculia, you'll have to apply for it, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into applying for it. But basically they want to help the children. So our system, I mean, we go to a CBSE school. I mean, there may be other systems where that's not the case. But look into what your board provides to children with disabilities, and then you can find ways to actually help the child.
I think taking the school leadership into confidence is also very important, because, as you were saying, these conversations are difficult, especially when you're talking to the parents. That there might be, a learning disability there, and going for further investigations. So often, I've seen that if the school leadership helps with these conversations, parents find it little more easier. I don't know. That's been my personal experience, to accept the fact that, okay, the next step needs to be taken. Because let's also be real, because teachers are often not taken very seriously by the parent community. I wouldn't say all parents are like this, but there are some cases who might imagine, oh, what do you know? but often coming in from the leadership, it might be a little more helpful to get the conversation further than
Right.
where we might get stuck. And also with whether your board supports, because I know this video will be watched by a much wider audience than just CBSE teachers. Um, speak to your school leadership as well, because they often have some contact or some link within the board where they could provide further guidance as well, that what are the abilities which are recognized by that board, what are the exemptions made, what are the special um, you know help that
Provisions.
is special provisions provided by these boards to the children with specific learning disorders. So these are, it's helpful to have conversations outside of yourself, because I at least in the initial years, I know I struggled by myself, and I was like, maybe my subject is such, because mine is an elective subject, that because they find it difficult to do certain other more challenging subjects, so they come and do mine. um, and I struggled with that a lot in my initial years of work. But as I began to talk to teachers with more experience, with the counselors in the school outside of my system as well, definitely those conversations helped me also to at least begin to build empathy, because that, I think, is really the first starting point for any teacher to even begin to recognize, like what you were saying, that they're not following instructions or unable to follow instructions. So I might look at this and, oh, this kid is ignoring me, this kid is insolent, this kid is
Yeah.
the labeling that then begins, that, oh, this child is lazy and unwilling to work, or the unwilling to work might often become a strategy for children with special learning disorders to protect themselves from the constant labeling that they are
Yes.
facing. That, oh, मैं तो हंसी में उड़ा दूंगा या हंसी में उड़ा दूंगी. So their sense of humor, with their sense of humor, they try to cover what they also feel is their shortcoming. And
Yeah.
these are, as you said, very complex issues, not easy answers. But one has to make a start somewhere, and especially when we don't have any direct support in the school. Definitely, these kind of, I'm hoping that these kind of sessions will at least start the conversation.
100%. Because we've got to help each other. I mean, that's the whole thing about a community, right? We've got to help each other, and that's why I'm very glad to be here and doing this at some level.
Completely my
Um,
pleasure and my
yeah,
privilege, Apranta. Yeah.
no, thank you. So now let's look at each of these, like the three main: dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. So let's start with dyslexia, which is basically what affects the reading and language processing issues, right? So here you see problems in word recognition, in decoding existing, understanding the relationship between sound and letters to decode the word to make it sound like a word that you recognize. It may show up in spelling also, because sounds and letter relationship, the phonemic awareness that we talk about is missing. And so their ability to hear, identify, and even understand how a word is made up, and therefore be able to change the word by changing the sounds of the word. All of that, syllables, rhymes, what sets of a word, the prefixes, suffixes, all of that is affected. So understanding the patterns in the language is something that has to be taught directly, understood directly. So how letters and sounds are connected, which two letters, if occurring together, will sound like this, and if you change the, and English is such a fun language where the same letters together in one spot and another spot, the word completely changes. So uh, with dyslexia, you're looking at ability to read and comprehend language for learning. So how can we help? So when we have a chapter, uh, we give them vocabulary for a unit or a chapter in advance. We teach them the vocabulary first so that they're able to predict the words. So how we can do that is by moving through the titles, the pictures, the chapter names, the bold words, and making sure that they know that these words are associated with the lesson. Wherever it's a word that they don't know, we teach them that in advance. And here the parents can come in if that's possible, or the tutor teacher can be given specific instructions about how to help. So the child is already prepared with some of the major words that are going to show up in the text, and has built some sort of fluency and word recognition skills. It's easier for them to read and comprehend what's on the paper. And a lot of times the child is just doing one word at a time, right? And so for them to to decode a word, then read the entire sentence and then put the sentence together and make it make sense, it takes longer, right? But if you if you give them these vocab words which they already know, it increases the speed by a significant amount. Additionally, ability to monitor and check your own understanding is something that has to be taught. So you have to model it. You have to say, so if you are reading this sentence, does that make sense in the context? Because that will clue them into an error they may have made while reading. What do I think will happen next will clue them into, okay, what could possible words be that may have come up next in this sentence? Can I figure out what the words mean from the sentences around them? So using context to understand the meaning of a word, of a difficult unfamiliar word in, say, an assessment setting. And words that I don't know that I'm reading, that I have to maybe make a glossary of, so that I can understand these sentences more easily. So basically, what are the next step, what are the steps you've got to think of before you're reading? All of these things that children are used to get or were taught in lower classes, have to somewhere be emphasized even now, so that they know what question to ask themselves if they're struggling. And generally, being able to visualize a text, being able to engage with it actively helps. So asking them to imagine what they're reading, what it would look like in a picture, uh, what would all the people look like, so that the image and the words sort of connect, and that creates extra connections in their memory to the material, which allows them to remember. Highlighting the words which are new or unfamiliar, so that they know that this is a word that I have to know, or this is an word that is important to this text. uh, how to take notes using graphic organizers like mind maps and flow charts. That also reduces the amount of text that the child encounters, and sort of makes it easier to remember the key terms, right? Writing down a question that comes to them while they're reading, or that the teacher is emphasizing on. So you teach them how to engage with the text also. What are the things that they have to look out for when they're reading a chapter or understanding a chapter? Sometimes when there are key important scenes or important concepts in, say, a history chapter, there's a battle of this thing, so even acting it out, okay, so on this side there were the British, and on that side we had Tipu Sultan, and they were involved in a siege. So what a siege would look like, if they act it out, it sticks better. So multi-sensory processing, multi-sensory instruction are ways to help the child. And it's always better to let the child and the parent know that you're going to now move into this chapter. So if they can read these sections and be prepared in advance, that allows the child to feel connected to the text, and they feel safer, because they know what's going to happen. So these are some simple ways to help the child engage if they have reading related issues and language processing related issues. So any questions
Yeah,
at this point?
I think this is very valuable, especially when you talked about visualizing what they're reading in the text. I think that is super powerful, because I know I would do that when I was a kid. I'm not sure if I had a learning disability, but in my mind's eye, and history was always my favorite subject. Well, and in my mind's eye, I would imagine, okay, what does it look like? And I was very fortunate because my parents. Love to travel, so no summer or winter break were we in the city. We would just move out to some part of the country, looking at its history, looking at its built heritage. So I would try to visualize my mind's eye, okay, what would an actual social scene would have looked like at that point.
Yeah.
So yes, and of course growing up with Amar Chitra Katha
Ah,
comics, one might always question. I mean, as a later, as a more advanced student of history, I definitely did question a lot of the things that were going on in the Amar Chitra Kathas in terms of certain stereotypes that were pushed forth. But as a beginner, I think they were very valuable, because much of my history, I think, I learned from the Amar Chitra Katha comics than I did from my textbook. The textbook, of course, always gives you the outline, but the real fleshing out of the story and how the characters might have interacted with each other, I think that came out in those stories. So if you're a history teacher and you're watching this, I could add this to the list of suggestions that Apranta has shared, that wherever possible, maybe bring in some Amar Katha comics, get your library if possible, stock some of these titles in the school library itself, because not all children will have equal access to the ability to even buy books. So
Yeah.
that's something that we should keep in mind as well. So having some of these key titles in the library, encouraging the students bring the book into the classroom, turn a few pages and show them. Okay, maybe you could point out the stereotypes as well while you're at it, because then it kind of makes it more real for them as well. So I think the visualization aspect is really so powerful, for a lot of the children, if not all, at least it covers a lot of the children with learning disorders. That if they're able to connect the dry story in the book with a scene, a very vivid scene going on in their minds, I think it's a powerful learning technique.
Yeah. And somewhere, uh, all of these strategies help all learners. So it's not like while by incorporating these strategies you are wasting your time. These or you're taking away too much time from your class. These will provide basis for all learners to understand the text better. So not only are you including people, you're giving all of these kids skills. And the thing is that you have to directly teach these skills. I think especially when we go into senior classes, we're like, okay, the child will know this, but incorporating these minor changes into your lesson plan would also give them these extra skills. So you're not only are they learning the subject, they're learning how to learn better, so or think better, which is always an advantage. And it's one of the things that, I mean, we can do for our students, so why not? So okay, that's about dyslexia, about reading this thing. We're going to dyscalculia now, which is affecting numbers and maths, right? So obviously calculations are affected, understanding what the numbers mean, how they're connected to each other, whether they're how, say, something as simple as, not simple, but it is complicated, but changing something from a million to lakhs, right? So the transition between that, uh, being able to make a guess about numbers, being able to do mental math, look at whether what's bigger, what is a bigger fraction, what is a smaller fraction, still a struggle for me. And all of these basic small things that make up our understanding of math and numbers are necessary, and you apply them to higher level concepts when you're doing higher level maths. So what that initial understanding of mathematical facts and numbers, which is required to create the base for higher levels of math, is affected, and as a result, processing at a faster speed, or even understanding how everything is connected to each other and the patterns in math is affected in dyscalculia. So how can we help? Wherever possible, make it okay for kids to use things to touch and move around. Like, so if you're talking about time, give them a watch, or make them a small this thing, or make them like an image or a chart that helps them to visualize the watch and how the watch moves. Even allowing them to sort of use a watch to do it initially, so that they understand, okay, now the minute hand is moving down. If you're talking about money, like, Soham had 30 rupees and Viraj had 20, and then they gave it to each other, or they gave it to somebody else, and now how much money is left? If we do that with actual notes first, the child will be able to connect it visually, and through the hands, by doing something, to how the taking away of money leads to lesser money here. So we're taking away, is subtracting, or giving or getting is adding, right? Fractions. Have a pizza party, cut it into 8 parts or 10 parts, and show them how it's still one. But when you cut it into 10 parts, 1/10 of it is taken away, and what 1/10 would look like. So as much as possible, let them experience the math and not let it just be abstract, right? Wherever visual supports can be put in, charts can be shown, images can be shown, look at the opportunities of representing all of this visually to the child. Wherever they can touch and experience it in their daily life, look at those opportunities for math. And again, we'll have to explicitly teach them math. So, what does problem solving look like? How do you think when you're solving these math problems? You'll have to still sometimes sit with them, help them move through the steps. Maybe when you assign a problem to the rest of the class and they're all solving, you can put give an input to this child, or make them sit with a study buddy who can help them move through the steps, and understand why this step is leading to the other step, or practice why this step is leading to the other step, and just give feedback of, okay, this is where you're this exactly where you copied the plus sign as a minus sign. Maybe those small inputs make helps them make the next step better, or to figure out where they've lost or where they've misunderstood a problem and correct it. It's, if it happens while the child is doing the question, it is more helpful versus afterwards, where the child still has to now reassess, okay, where was I, what was the question, where did it go wrong. So wherever feedback can be given of common errors that they're making, and helping them practice how to do that better, helps. Just generally review and practice, practice as many opportunities as possible. Sometimes children with the LD also have visual deficits. So, for example, if you have a sheet of paper, they may not be able to process or focus only on one part of the question. So, or one part, or they may be overwhelmed by, say, all of the questions on the question paper. So, helping them cover or fold the question paper in such a manner that they just see that one question also can reduce their anxieties about math. Or using, like, if they're at home, a cutout window to just put it on the worksheet for exactly that space in the text, and doing just that question, and then you move the cutout window to the next question. So you basically, a cutout window is like a sheet of paper, and you cut a window out of it, and you put it on the worksheet for just the amount of question you require, and do it in that, and then you move the cutout window lower. So sometimes even visual deficits tend to overwhelm children with LD, and that can be helpful. You have to teach it like a foreign language. A child does not know math, and math is a language, right? Many of the times we're experiencing problems is because we don't understand concepts. We're missing vocabulary, we're missing the words, we're not able to recognize symbols quickly, we're not able to understand how these words are connected with each other, or how these numbers are connected to each other, and what will happen if I move this and move that. So if they're able to understand the keywords, what it looks like when they're written, what it looks like when they're spoken, if the vocabulary of math improves, vocabulary of number facts improves, they are at an advantage when they're learning. uh, I had a lot of trouble when I was a kid with math, and um, I had a great teacher in the ninth and 10th. I was literally like barely passing throughout middle school, and I had a great teacher in ninth and 10th. And more than anything else, finding my own understanding of math, basically understanding what I didn't know, and what was the missing this thing. Like, if say, if I don't know that if I move a plus on the other side of the equation, it'll become a minus, I'm going to do all the questions wrong, right? Independent of whether I understand plus and minus. So, understanding where my gaps were, my personal relationship with math improved, because I knew, okay, if I understand this concept, I'll be able to fix this gap. and that really helped. I don't know if I'm making any sense. uh,
No, I think it
such.
makes a lot of sense because yeah, maths not was not one of my strong suits either while in school, and I had a mix of teachers. I had some teachers who really did help me improve my relationship with maths. Yet there were also other teachers who, for whatever reasons, um, made me fear math even more. I mean, I think my learning gaps there increased even more because I was not even engaging with the teacher, let alone the subject. um, so yeah, the engagement part is really important. And one tip that I really liked, Apranta, which I think we can use across any subject, when you said that there could be a visual overstimulation as well, and leading to further anxiety, was that cutout window, so that it helps the student really bring their focus into that sum without worrying, oh, I have five other questions which I think I don't understand either.
Yeah,
So at least to take one thing at a time. So I think that is a very a tip that I'm definitely taking home today, and perhaps find its use within my own classes as well, where the student focuses on that one problem, rather than getting too overwhelmed with too many things happening.
yeah.
So definitely very, very helpful there. Yeah.
No, and I'm telling you, it really reduces anxiety because I've used it myself. Sometimes just put a book on both sides of the question, and I'm just like, okay, okay, I just have to do this. Once I get through this, I can move on to the next one. So yeah,
Absolutely, because anxiety is definitely a part of our lives today, and especially if there's a learning disability, I think it just gets multiplied, I think. Yeah, so just these little strategies also can make a big difference in how at least the student is also navigating through that moment of anxiety.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, so we've talked about maths now, and we just talked about writing, right? So I'm only looking at these three because they're usually what are diagnosed, and there are, I mean, these are the ones which are mentioned in the DSM, which is and the ICD. The Okay, mostly when we look at school, we're looking at these three areas. So I'm just going to talk about it. There are other kinds of learning disabilities as well. Maybe we can discuss it at a different date. So dysgraphia affects handwriting and motor skills and ability to express. So it shows up in different ways. It may show up with bad handwriting, but it may also show up as very pretty handwriting, but nothing that the child writes is clear, or is it seems logical, or it seems to be a lot of words but nothing makes sense, right? So again, legible writing, number writing, you know, English writing or language writing, all of that may be affected, because it's connected somewhere with ability to retrieve what does that word, or what does that letter, or what does that number look like, and somewhere there's an issue in the recall as well. So additionally, planning and organizing thoughts to such a level that you can express yourself, what comes first, what's the middle, what's the end, all of that is also affected. So not only is the child struggling to write down, their ability to plan and think of what happens next can also be affected. So again, there's different ranges of severity. You would first see it in the most no I think I'll rephrase that. uh, More commonly, people will be able to recognize dysgraphia if there are handwriting issues, right? If the child's ability to make the number or make the letter is affected, you would be like, okay, maybe the child has a learning disability, we can find it. But even children with beautiful handwriting have dysgraphia, because I think is something that I have to say out loud multiple times, that even with a great handwriting, a child can have a learning disability. It matters. What matters is the quality, right? Or a child may have multiple language errors, may not be able to explain simple sentences, or even simple words, like they're writing wood in would, the correct way in one, and wloud in another. So but what they're writing blows your mind because it's so sensitive, so complex. So both these ways of expressing show up in dysgraphia. You may have somebody with excellent handwriting, but nothing makes sense. But somebody with terrible spelling errors, what looks like a completely different language, but the quality of thought or the expressive expressed nuances are so complex and so sensitive that you're like, my god. So both can happen within dysgraphia, and that's the nature of this uh, of most of these learning disabilities, that there's such a range of diversity even with learners of with LD, that sometimes what looks like a child with LD might not be a child with LD, and what doesn't look like a child with LD is definitely a child with LD. So it's definitely something that uh, the experts, the clinical psychologists doing the assessments will take care of. But uh, why I want to say this is because let's not think that we know LD. Let's look at the child's distress level, the child's ability to adapt to school, to judge whether the child is uh, needs our help or not, right? Despite learning about it, there may still be cases where I might not be able to understand, okay, this child has an LD. I may think it's an anxiety thing, I may think it's an emotional thing, and may, really directly try to work with that. But it turns out that the child has problems processing information, and that is why they're experiencing anxiety and emotional. So wherever you're feeling lost, bring it up to somebody who's an expert on it, and help them figure it out. I mean, let them figure it out and help you through that process. uh, okay, back to where we were, ways to help a child with dysgraphia. um, Generally, first you'll have to teach them phonemic awareness, and so somewhere the letter sound relationships, and here parents will have to come in and will have to support. How do you understand, how is it that words are made up because of their sounds, because of their letters, what they sound like? So basically, how to spell unfamiliar words using these letter sound relationships would help when you're dealing with complex terminology which shows up as soon as the child reaches senior school. um, Give the child 5 minutes of thinking time, like delay before writing something, or 2 minutes or 1 minute of thinking time. Incorporate that into your lessons, like take 2 minutes, look at the text, think about what you want to write, and then begin writing, so that the child also learns how to plan. And this is great time to give inputs about organizing, about planning your answers. And the child takes that time to really put their thoughts together, to look at what their thoughts are and then put them together. So incorporate that into the answer writing time of the child. um, Give models of a good answer for struggling children, or good essays for a struggling child, so that they know, okay, this is what you've got to do. So many times you're told, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, but you don't know what is right. So giving them examples is important. Teaching them uh, what how an essay or an answer is written. So if it's a 4 marker, what do you expect? If it's a 6 marker, what do you expect? What are possible key terms of vocabulary that may show up in this answer? So the child already knows, okay, these are nodes that will help me connect to what I know, or these are like focus points that I can use. The key terms become the bullets that make up the answer, right? Sometimes because there's a writing issue, there's a grip issue, getting a pencil grip or a paper with raised lines or a larger pen or a thicker pen may help them with their penmanship. And generally, making them practice handwriting is important. This is something that the kids will struggle with even in higher classes. So wherever they have opportunity to just copy stuff down, make them practice consciously. Make it like, okay, so since you have, this is part of your assignment, and in the assignment you've got to note down this, or this is a practical file, you have to note all of this down. Even if you're just blindly copying, make it a conscious decision to practice with the best ability, with a larger pencil grip, with a thicker pen, so that your handwriting improves. So wherever possible, uh, you know wherever you have an opportunity where they can practice spelling and language and writing, like maybe writing an email, an Instagram post, or a caption, wherever they have an opportunity to write, capitalize on that. So, I mean, again, parents and teachers will have to work together for all of these opportunities to make sense. uh, and why not typed assignments, or wherever it's possible, the child can, whenever it's not a CBSE or a board requirement, the child can give you typed assignments, because that's easier for the child. It won't take as long for the child to finish. Or they may, if they get a writer by the board, they can also uh, dictate their answers to parents or siblings or people to, and submit those assignments again. But only for children who get scribes, because we don't want to make them dependent. We want to basically have them practice writing as much as possible. So that's
Yeah,
where we're at.
yeah. I
Huh.
think this is a valuable tip, especially when it comes to assignments, because there is no hurry in that sense that you don't have, okay, within 3 hours you need to finish and give something, or 3.5 hours, 4 hours. So I think assignments, yes, if a child is struggling too much, why push it harder?
Yeah.
And I believe, and I have allowed a lot of my students to give in typed assignments as well, especially when time has been of the essence there, that okay, the assignment
Hmm.
has to be submitted within a certain period of time to give me time to
Yeah.
give whatever feedback that is required. But if you can manage, if you do have the luxury of time at a certain at least at certain points of time in the year, do encourage them to write by hand and
Right.
make a conscious effort to write as well as they can. So they can go slower, take longer, maybe give them a shorter assignment, break them up into smaller bits, that okay, do only one question in a day rather than doing all 14 um,
In one
in
this
the
thing.
same
Yeah.
sitting. Yeah. So sometimes it's not even about the content that you're teaching. It's sometimes just these regular functions that if we can modify a little bit, make that window of opportunity available to the children. I think that in itself takes away a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the self consciousness, a lot of the struggle that they are already in on a daily basis. And yes, the text to speech software is only getting better over time. So I know Microsoft Word has a dictation tool. Google Docs has the ability to take dictation. And yes, over the years, I've seen both these tools becoming even better, especially when it comes to understanding accents.
Yeah.
For example,
Yeah.
initially I saw that Indian way of speaking English wasn't so well picked up by these two softwares. But over time, I've seen that it's got better. I have to go in and make fewer corrections. Once I've dictated something to a Word document, or MS Word or Google Word, and Google Doc, that is. And technology is only getting better from here on. And I know now on mobile phones you can do some similar stuff you can do on your mobile phones
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You can.
technology is definitely improving. So teachers do keep an eye on the newer things that are coming up. There are so many tutorials, so many things on Twitter, on YouTube. Just type in what you want in the search bar, and so many resources come up. So I think a lot of my learning, as far as technology is concerned, has been just Googling or going onto YouTube and searching for something. So I think these are powerful ways. I don't have to be a special educator, though it does help to be a special educator, because then you perhaps are a little more equipped, I think. But as a regular teacher, if I can even get some of these strategies in place, I think that in itself gives a leg up to children with special disabilities, specific
I
learning disorders.
Yes, and many times, you're thinking the special educator also has to work one on one with the child, right? Or in small groups with the child. That takes time and is effort and is consuming and is taking them away from the mainstream classroom also, right? So, if both of them are happening at the same time, it's wonderful. But children learn better with their peers. They learn better when they feel part of a class, and they feel like their inputs are important and valid, whatever those inputs may be. So as much as you can, if some of these and there may be kids without learning disabilities also struggling with writing and math and reading, who may benefit from this. So all of it will make your classroom a better place for children. And just general recommendations that would help is that one, seating is very important. So you have to, for a child who with LD or with ADHD, with anything, away from distractions is very, very important. It's best if they're near the teacher, uh, with a study buddy or a responsible peer who can model the right behavior or the right step, the next step, so that they can quickly orient themselves to what they need to do next. That helps. Thinking time before answering a question. Many times we ask a question, we expect an answer. There'll be four kids who will have their hands up ready to this thing, but even they may make errors in their enthusiasm. So if thinking time is incorporated, it gives every child the time to pause, reflect, and answer. If it's possible, ask multiple students the same question, so that different ways of expression and different ways of understanding the question, like modeling. Basically, you they see different models of expression that they can then use to flesh up their answers. Many times they may also not know the answer, so knowing that so and so has already answered this question and this is the right answer, at least they can take the right answer and explain it in their own words, and that creates a connection. um, you have to teach them organization and planning, of how to keep track of homework, how to break down homework into small sections that they can complete one at a time. Like you said, instead of doing all 14 questions in one go, one question a day, and maybe you can give an input of them checking in, showing you that question, you just going like, okay, that's correct, you can add this, and then they move on to the next question the same day. So that if you don't teach them, they're not going to learn it on their own. That is fundamental. You will have to, so these life skills or these abilities to process information, and how to, the things that we know, we seem to know automatically, you will have to break it down and let them know. uh, Let keep parents in the loop of important due dates. Many times the children have forgotten by the time they've gotten home that, this is an important assignment, however much it may be important. It's not like they're trying to uh, they're lazy or they've forgotten. They've literally they just don't remember that that was something to remember, right? So keep the parents in the loop. It's another step that will allow both of you to monitor the child. Shorter assignments wherever possible, wherever timelines can be extended. uh, as long as you're keeping track, the child is not leaving all of their assignment for the last date and prolonging the problem. But if you're in contact with parents, it helps. um, and I think this statement, it's not about you. You may do all the right things, you may do everything, the child may still struggle, the child may still, it's not a reflection of your teaching, it's not a reflection of you. And many times when you make it personal, I mean, there are good things about making things taking things personally in the class, in the sense that you take accountability and responsibility. But there's a difference between accountability and taking responsibility for each learner in your classroom, and taking it personally when there are ups and downs, right? So uh, you are just a facilitator, you're just a conduit. Children will come and go. You have to make your classroom a space for them to learn and to explore and to make mistakes and to just grow as people. But if a child is not doing well, uh, many times, there may be school authorities which may ask, okay, why is this child not doing well in your class? That child will definitely not be doing well in most classrooms because of their struggles. So keep in touch with your teachers, find ways that all all of your peers can also practice the same strategy, so the child has a routine and a structure and knows what to do next. But don't take it personally when they fail, because that's where it comes from. The anger or the frustration comes from you feeling like you're not doing enough, or you're not a teacher who can handle this, or you feel helpless, and it comes out in frustrations. It may come out in different ways. So telling yourself that it's not about you, it's about the child, and the child will take their individual unique journeys through life. They are going to have ups and downs. Whoever the teacher was at this time and place will also allow you to bring distance. And find reasons to like the child instead of focusing on reasons that the child has an issue or focusing on the problem. Why is this child the cutest child ever, or the kid who you're going to learn from, uh, or the kid who, I mean, at the end of the day, if both of you are happy to see each other, you are on the right track. There may be days when you're extremely frustrated with each other or the subject, but if at the end of the day you can look at each other and be like, "ठीक है, chalo, let's try again tomorrow. Today was a no show, but I like you, you like me, and we'll be there tomorrow, and we can do this." You're at an advantage, an immense advantage, and that kind of trust is just irreplaceable. And the last bit, and this is the super important bit, is that give at least 3 times more positive feedback. Children, think of it like a piggy bank, and I think I read about this in a paper, and they described it so well, and it stays with me because I read this like some 7 8 years ago when I was doing my when I was studying. So all all of the comments, compliments, criticisms, uh, think of it like a piggy bank. So as all the compliments are additions to the piggy banks, and all the criticisms are um, things taken away from the piggy bank, right? So if the child doesn't have a piggy bank of good things to fall back on, the child is going to feel extremely insecure. So, and children with learning disabilities, because of their history of failure, many times throughout their study, or I mean their learning history, they they may be more attuned to negative feedback. They may be looking for negative feedback to make it all make sense, that there must be something wrong with me, that's why I'm doing this, right? Or that's why I'm not able to do it. So wherever you can see it, disproportionate, even if it sounds like you are, even if your feedback is great, you were in school today, give them the positive feedback, so that at least that becomes a motivation for them to stick longer at a task that is sometimes overwhelming for them, taking them much longer than their peers. And they know this. Children know when they're struggling. Children know when other people are able to do better or quicker or whatever at the task than them. And they're acutely aware of this. So, your ability to find that one thing or two things or three things that they're doing well despite will keep them motivated and on task. And somewhere these two things, that that you like the child likes you, and so you'll be back again in the classroom to try the next day. And you can see the good things that the child is able to do, or is trying to do, if not able to, or is somewhere in their imagination hoping for on some days. Uh, that will give you the basis to help the child in the future. Yeah,
I
that's
think
where
these
I'm
are
at.
just such valuable tips, Apranta. I was just thinking about each of these last few recommendations that you've shared, especially when where you said that we also need to make a distance, um, because you worked hard, and we all expect certain returns, right, after we've put in some effort. And when that return is not forthcoming, it can lead to a lot of frustrations, and it can lead to a lot of self doubt, that did I try my best? The guilt that might come with it, that
Yeah.
maybe I didn't think hard enough about it, or I didn't use the right strategies. So it's very important for the teacher also to maintain his or her own motivation by also keeping this distance, because frustrations can come easily, and as you said, they may express themselves in different ways which could be undesirable for a lot of people around us, even not just for ourselves, but even for people around us. I mean, often frustrations come out on the softer targets. I mean, now you can just imagine what the softer targets would be like. But it's very, very important. One, because I also need to understand that I'm not a special educator, so I may not already have a lot of advanced knowledge um,
And
about
special
problems, leave
educators
alone
struggle.
how to solve those problems. But at least the issue of empathy, when you did bring out the point where find reasons to like the child. So you like me and I like you. So let's get back to it again tomorrow. So I think these 2 points really do tie in beautifully together. And that's really the key, at the end of the day, to a teacher student relationship, because work is so much easier when you're working with people you like.
Yeah.
So right, and I think that is the key here. So we've already taken up a lot of time today. I know viewers, I have a lot of questions in my head right now. Viewers have a lot of questions in their heads right now. So do take time to put in a comment if you want to, a further clarification on an issue, or you have an idea or a strategy that has worked for many of your children. Do share that with us in the comment section below, so that we can continue to learn from each other. And if there are questions that are more pertinent, we'll definitely call in not only Apranta once again, but also I'm on the lookout for more experts or more teachers who've had experience with children with specific learning disabilities in their classrooms, where they can come in and share their ideas. So I know I have a few speakers lined up over the next couple of weeks. But if you know of somebody, or if you would like to come up yourself on this stage and share your learnings, your findings, your experience with other educators, as we say, teaching is never the job of a lone wolf. It's really part of a larger community project. And so yeah, that's the whole point of this series of videos, where we are going to learn from each other, learn from experts as to how to set up our children best for success in life. So with that, we come to the end of today's session. Don't forget to comment your questions, observations, helpful comments as well, tips and strategies that you would like to share with the rest of us. Till the next session, bye bye.